Well, the highly charged decision to release Oscar Pistorius into parole has indeed thrown open the discussion on the eligibility of parole and parole procedure in our country. Pistorius will now serve the rest of his 5-year term under house arrest in Pretoria. For more, we're joined in studio by Clifford Gordon from CL Gordon Attorneys. Good afternoon, Cliff. Always a pleasure to have you on the News Today desk.
Thank you.
Cliff, the parole regime very much under the spotlight with this case. Just take us through that distinction between correctional supervision and parole in the context of the Pistorius case.
Okay, so in general, parole is where a prisoner or an offender is sentenced to a term and then is allowed to be released at least half that term. Then with correctional supervision, it's actually a sentence where you get to serve your sentence outside of the prison. So it's a non-custodial sentence. In other words, Oscar was given in this case by Judge Masipa. His sentence was 5 years in prison, but with the option of correctional supervision. So at 1/6 of his sentence, he was considered by the Correctional Supervision and Parole Board and was allowed to be released, as has happened yesterday.
Cliff, what does parole eligibility actually mean? And how do we determine who genuinely deserves that parole and who doesn't?
So eligibility for parole means somebody who, after being considered by the Correctional Supervision and Parole Board, is allowed to go out on parole, or in this case, correctional supervision. And the factors they would consider would be, for example, to check whether someone is suitable. For example, if he shows remorse, if he's been a good prisoner, if he hasn't got into any fights, hasn't joined any gangs, how good his behavior has been in general, what the sentence was in the case of parole.
Yes.
And also the nature of the offence. Again, only that would be only in the case of parole.
All right. Cliff, one wants to get a sense of what life will be like for Oscar now in these months post-incarceration. Will he be able to go to the shops? Will he be able to train that he's been pushing for? Will he be able to look for a job or seek employment? He is facing a string of parole conditions. Could you fill us in on these? And do these conditions vary with the severity of the crime in question?
So firstly, the conditions would vary not only based on the severity of the crime in question, but based on the person that's being considered. So, for example, in Oscar's case, he has to see a psychiatrist at least once a week. So he would be allowed out of his uncle's house to go and see the psychologist. He would be allowed to go and work. He wouldn't just be able to get up and go to the shops like a normal person. He would be able to, for example, go to church on the weekends if he's a member of a congregation. He'd have to, so he'd have to go out and seek a job if he wanted to go and work. He would have to get special permission if he wanted to go and train, but that would be part of employment, as that is essentially what Oscar's vocation is. He's an athlete.
It's interesting. What happens if one or more of these conditions are violated? Does the offender just pack up and go back to jail? Is there a warning issued? Just take us through that process.
So what would happen is, firstly, a warning would be issued. An investigation would be conducted into the violation. If it's a serious violation, they might even have a disciplinary inquiry. And after that inquiry, then it would be decided by the authorities, by community corrections, whether or not that violation is severe enough to return the inmate or the offender to prison, or whether they would actually continue to be allowed out, but either with a stricter condition or perhaps just allowing them to be under more, or rather under a warning. If they violate again, they might be returned.
One of Oscar's parole conditions do stipulate that he must hold a meeting with the Steenkamp family when and if they are available to do so, or agree to do so. What kind of impact, Cliff, would the meeting of this nature have on the case, should such a meeting happen before the appeal case that is set for November 3rd?
It wouldn't really have much of a bearing on the appeal, because the judges confine themselves to the record of what's happened in the proceedings and the heads of argument of the counsel that are presenting arguments. So they wouldn't really consider the extraneous factors of this type of situation.
Thank you so much for your time on the SABC News Desk, Cliff. Thank you for breaking it all down for us. That was Clifford Gordon from CL Gordon Attorneys joining us on the News Today desk.